If you're watching this right now, it means you've reached that quiet yet unbearable point when something deep inside you starts to scream. You might not know exactly what's happening, but you can feel that you can't keep living as you have been. It's as if something within you has cracked, an invisible fracture separating who you truly are from the role you've been pretending to play. This moment isn't random. It's inevitable. At some point in every human life, an inner collapse occurs. Most people ignore it, numbed by comfort, buried in routine, or paralyzed by fear of change. But for some, like you, this breakdown becomes a calling, a restless impulse that refuses to be silenced. Carl Gustav Jung called this the call to individuation, a psychological process in which the soul rejects the false masks built to please others and to survive. What you're watching now isn't just a video. It's a mirror, a symbolic reflection arriving precisely when your rational mind runs out of answers. Yet your unconscious already knows it's time to move. This is the instant when normal life begins to reveal its true nature. A mechanical existence, shaped by others' expectations. Social roles worn thin and unfulfilled promises. Maybe you're in a relationship that quietly drains your energy, or in a job that keeps your body alive while slowly killing your soul. Perhaps your prison is subtler, the fear of disappointing your parents, the anxiety of not being accepted, or the burden of walking a path built for you, but never by you. Jung warned that the real danger of modern life isn't chaos, it's the unconscious adaptation to falseness. The greatest tragedy is living a life that isn't yours and never realizing it. That is why the awakening always comes through pain. When your psyche has whispered through dreams, subtle crises, or quiet exhaustion and has been ignored, it raises its voice. What once felt like mild discomfort turns into despair. What used to be doubt becomes anguish. What began as fatigue turns into total collapse. And then something strange happens. You start to notice patterns, signs and messages that seem almost designed for you. Not because the universe is casting spells, but because your soul is now actively searching for the keys to escape the prison within. It's at this precise moment that you stumble upon content like this video. According to Jung, the unconscious has its own symbolic intelligence. It speaks in images, emotions, and synchronicities. It begins to manifest the moment the ego becomes ready to listen. Maybe you found this video while scrolling aimlessly through hundreds of others. But nothing concerning the soul is accidental. What follows isn't meant to fix you or offer another self-help formula. It's an invitation, a challenge to face the reflection staring back at you. You'll have to confront what you've avoided for years, the fear, the guilt, the frustration, the shame, the anger, the emptiness. These emotions aren't proof that you're weak. They're signals that the foundation of your current life is breaking down because it's reached its limit. You aren't falling apart. You're being pushed to be reborn. And that moment can't be delayed any longer. Most people walk through life like functioning ghosts, waking up, working, obeying, and repeating. They think this is normal. But it's not normal. It's only common. And what's common isn't necessarily healthy. You were taught since childhood to seek stability, to obey the rules, to avoid making noise. Be grateful, they said. Do what's right. But right according to whom? Carl Jung wrote in the Undiscovered Self that the greatest threat to the modern soul is not madness or poverty, but massification, the transformation of a person into a replaceable cog within a vast system that values conformity over truth. When you begin to feel suffocated by your routine, that pressure isn't a flaw in your character. It's a signal. It's your psyche whispering, this isn't you. You may have followed every rule. You studied, found a decent job, entered a relationship, posted smiling pictures online. And yet, you feel hollow, as if some part of you stands outside your own life, merely observing. That sensation of detachment isn't mental illness. It's consciousness awakening. It's the unconscious letting you know that the persona you created for survival can no longer sustain real living. The so-called normality you were sold is a refined kind of prison. It trades your authenticity for small doses of pleasure, social approval, financial stability, acceptance from others. The cost? Your inner voice, your creativity, your spontaneity. Over time, you forget who you truly are. Jung warned that while adapting to society is necessary, it becomes pathological the moment it demands the abandonment of the self. Millions of people live this way, outwardly normal, but internally numb, spiritually drained, and emotionally lost. The system rewards obedience with distractions, endless entertainment, fast food, and a digital illusion of belonging. All of it designed so you never have to stop and ask, am I actually living or merely existing? This collective deception builds an illusion of safety, but inside you still feel the fracture, the same inner crack that keeps widening. You might try to drown it in productivity, entertainment, or shallow relationships, but no distraction can quiet a soul in crisis. And when you finally begin to question, the world tries to convince you that you are the problem. They'll say it's just anxiety, that you're overworked, that you need a break or a new hobby. But deep inside, you know this isn't simple exhaustion, it's despair. You sense something profoundly wrong with your life, not because you've failed, but because you're awake enough to see that the entire structure is corrupted. False normality is nothing less than psychic death, a life guided by obligation rather than meaning. Jung once said that the unlived life is a disease from which one can die. And indeed, countless people are dying slowly, day by day, trapped in stories written by others. But there is a way out, and it begins by dismantling the illusion. You cannot return to sleep once your eyes have opened. The restlessness you feel, that tension between who you are and who you pretend to be, is the threshold of transformation. What you are experiencing is not brokenness, it's readiness. The process of breaking down is the psyche's way of preparing for renewal. It's the soul saying, enough. If this message resonates with you, it's because something inside recognizes its truth. We live in a culture that interprets suffering as failure. You're told that if you're sad or lost, something must be wrong with you. But that's a dangerous lie. Suffering isn't a defect to be erased. It's a code to be deciphered. It's your inner world demanding attention. And for perhaps the first time in your life, you're beginning to understand that pain has a purpose. When the moment of transformation arrives, the soul simply refuses to keep pretending. What we call existential crisis or emotional collapse is actually the beginning of awakening. Before every rebirth, there must first be collapse. The walls that once protected you now suffocate you. The mask you wore to belong begins to crack under the weight of truth. You start losing interest in things that once defined you, careers, relationships, possessions, and it feels like your life is falling apart. But in reality, what's dying is the false self you were never meant to be. Jung described this as the night sea journey, a descent into darkness where the ego dissolves and the deeper self begins to emerge. It's a terrifying passage because everything familiar starts to vanish. Yet, paradoxically, this loss is sacred. Only by walking through the ruins of who you were can you uncover the foundation of who you truly are. The system calls this burnout. But what if burnout isn't exhaustion from doing too much? It's the soul's exhaustion from living without meaning. You're not tired because you've done too much. You're tired because you've betrayed yourself for too long. In this dark night, the soul demands honesty. You can no longer lie to yourself about what you want, who you love, or what feels true. The collapse strips away illusion. It's the moment the psyche says, no more. Many people never make it past this point. They panic, turn back, or numb themselves again with distractions. But those who endure the storm discover something extraordinary on the other side, a quiet, unshakable clarity. Rebirth doesn't arrive as thunder or fire. It comes in silence, in moments of deep surrender, when you finally stop fighting who you are. And from that silence, something ancient and indestructible begins to awaken within you. Once the illusion collapses, a strange calm begins to settle in. It's not happiness, at least not in the way you used to define it. It's something deeper, quieter, almost sacred. You start seeing life not as a race to be won, but as a mystery to be understood. The world hasn't changed, you have. You begin to notice the beauty in simplicity. A conversation that feels real, silence that doesn't scare you, solitude that feels like peace instead of loneliness. This is the beginning of the return to yourself. The false layers start falling away, and what's left is something raw, honest, and alive. For the first time, you realize that most people are not truly living. They're merely performing. They chase distractions, comfort, and validation, mistaking noise for life. You used to be one of them, but now you can't go back. Once the curtain lifts, pretending becomes unbearable. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of all parts of the self, including the ones you've denied or feared. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. The shadows you once avoided, the anger, shame, and fear, are no longer enemies but teachers. Each one carries a fragment of the truth about who you are. This awakening is both liberation and responsibility. You can no longer blame the system, your parents, or society for everything. Freedom means ownership of your thoughts, your choices, and your path. And that's terrifying. Because now you see clearly that every decision either aligns you with your truth or drags you back into illusion. The paradox of awakening is that it isolates you, not because you're better than others, but because you no longer fit the dream they're still trapped in. But this solitude is not punishment. It's initiation. After awakening, there's a silence that most people can't handle. You start noticing how many of your old conversations were just noise, distractions meant to keep the illusion alive. Now when you try to speak your truth, it often meets blank stares or nervous laughter. It's not that people don't care. They just can't hear what threatens their sleep. This stage feels like exile. You see the world clearly, but few walk beside you. You may feel tempted to shrink back into comfort, to rejoin the crowd, to pretend again. But deep down, you know that returning would be spiritual suicide. Once you've glimpsed truth, ignorance is no longer possible. In this loneliness, something profound begins to grow, self-trust. You start realizing that you no longer need external approval to feel real. The opinions of others lose their power over you. What once terrified you, being misunderstood, being alone, now feels strangely liberating. This is where you start to embody your truth rather than talk about it. You learn that integrity is not about being liked. It's about alignment between your inner world and your outer life. Every no you say to what's false becomes a yes to what's authentic. But don't mistake this solitude for isolation. It's preparation. You're being stripped of everything inauthentic so that when you finally meet others on the same path, you'll recognize them instantly, not by their words, but by their energy. They too have died and been reborn, Jung said. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Yet through this sacred loneliness, your connection to life itself deepens. You start realizing that even when no one understands you, existence does. As time passes, the loneliness begins to transform. What once felt like emptiness now feels like space, room for something genuine to emerge. You start rebuilding your life, not from ambition or fear, but from meaning. You no longer ask, what will make me successful? But rather, what feels true? You begin to see that meaning is not something you find. It's something you create through conscious living. Every small act done with awareness, every word spoken with integrity, every moment spent fully present becomes sacred. Life starts to feel less like a battle and more like a dialogue between your soul and the universe. You also start noticing synchronicities, strange coincidences that seem to guide your path. These are not random. They're signs that you're finally aligned with the deeper rhythm of existence. What once felt chaotic now begins to make sense in mysterious ways. This is the stage where gratitude appears naturally. Not the forced kind taught in self-help books, but a deep, quiet appreciation for simply being. You see beauty even in pain, wisdom in loss, and purpose in uncertainty. The same experiences that once broke you now serve as teachers. You understand now that true spirituality is not an escape from life, but full participation in it, with open eyes and an open heart. You no longer chase happiness. You cultivate presence. And paradoxically, that's when real joy begins to surface, the kind that doesn't depend on outcomes or validation. As you walk this new path, you realize that awakening was never about escaping the world, but learning to walk through it consciously. Every choice, every breath, every interaction becomes a reflection of the person you are becoming, whole, aware, and real. Now that you've reconnected with meaning, life feels different, not easier, but truer. You begin to move with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove itself. There's no longer a desperate need to be right, admired, or accepted. You simply act from alignment, knowing that when your inner and outer worlds match, peace follows naturally. This is where your energy shifts from reaction to creation. Instead of being pushed by fear, you're pulled by purpose. You start doing things not because you should, but because they resonate with who you really are. And this authenticity attracts new experiences and people that reflect your growth. But living in alignment also requires courage. The world still tries to lure you back into distraction, conformity, and comfort. You'll face moments of doubt, moments where you question everything again. Yet this time, you're equipped with something you didn't have before: inner authority. You trust your intuition more than external voices. Integrity becomes your compass. You stop betraying yourself just to keep the peace or to fit in. You realize that saying no to what's false is an act of love, not rebellion. And slowly, the world around you starts to rearrange itself to match your new vibration. Opportunities that once seemed out of reach begin to appear naturally, because you're no longer chasing, you're allowing. This alignment doesn't make you perfect. It makes you whole. You accept your flaws, your darkness, your contradictions. You no longer need to hide them, because you understand they're all part of your humanity. Real strength isn't about never falling. It's about falling consciously and rising with wisdom each time. You've begun to live from the inside out, and that changes everything. Finally, you reach the ultimate step, the conscious choice to step fully into your own life. No one will save you. No teacher, no book, no video, no external force. The responsibility is entirely yours. This truth can feel heavy, even terrifying, but it is also profoundly liberating. You realize that waiting for permission or a perfect moment is a trap. Life doesn't hand out guarantees. The leap into authenticity requires courage, uncertainty, and trust in yourself. The ego protests, warning of danger and failure, but the soul insists. Move forward. This is your path. This is the threshold where fear becomes your guide, not your enemy. Jung called it confronting the shadow, the parts of yourself you've hidden, denied, or ignored. To cross it, you must face your fears, your grief, your anger, your guilt. You will stumble, cry, and doubt, but on the other side lies freedom, presence, and meaning. You don't need to be ready. No one is ever fully prepared. What matters is that you are tired enough of pretending and brave enough to say, "I cannot stay here any longer." This is the breaking point. The watershed separating those who merely exist from those who truly live. Once you take this step, life aligns with your authentic self. Fear remains, but it no longer controls you. You walk consciously, choosing each thought, word, and action. Your inner authority grows, your relationships shift, and every experience becomes a reflection of your true self. The life you were meant to live begins where the false life ends, beyond fear, beyond conformity, beyond expectation. And now, having listened to the call of your soul, you are ready to step fully into it. If this video has made you see the world differently, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you next time.